Mortals. They're always in far greater danger than their feeble minds could ever hope to understand.
Hey everybody, Ben Moore here. I am joined with the lovely Brandon Jones. Brandon, you like Elder Scrolls, you like MMOs, is that correct?
I do. I have talked about MMOs a lot, and I did bring Skyrim previously to a Hall of Greats. So I am your candidate, sir.
Yeah, I think this definitely qualifies you for what we're going to be talking about today. ZeniMax Bethesda basically reached out to us, and they're like, hey, do you want to check out the latest chapter, Blackwood, the upcoming chapter, I guess I should say, it's coming out in June, for the Elder Scrolls Online. And I thought to myself, that is a game that I've been meaning to, seriously dive into.
Wow, yeah.
For a long time. It's always kind of been interesting to me, but I've always sort of bounced off of it. So to give you some history of my Elder Scrolls Online experience, I played it when it first came out, and I wasn't really feeling it. And then I jumped back in for a little bit again with the Elsewhere chapter. And I liked it a lot better, but didn't stick with it. And so I was like, this will be a good opportunity to kind of see where the game is at right now. And for people who are experienced with the game, it's going to be kind of hard separating my general impressions of Elder Scrolls Online with what's new in Blackwood. So it's going to be kind of a mix of sort of new player impressions to this game, and then stuff that is new in Blackwood. But Brandon, I had a really good time.
Yay!
I had a really good time because it was basically a single player CRPG for me. That's basically what it felt like the entire time.
Yeah. I'm curious how this would be. It seems like a pretty good lead time on a launch of new content coming to an MMO. So I'm curious how they structured it, what you were able to do if this isn't coming, for another couple months.
Yeah. So I got to check out the two big things that we're going to be talking about today are sort of the Blackwood area that the chapter takes place in, and then I checked out some of the main quests, some side quests, and then companions, which are a brand new feature to Elder Scrolls Online. There are 2 companions, each with their own storylines.
Oh, cool.
But before we got access to Blackwood, I said, hey, I don't play this game. Am I going to be able to jump in and enjoy it? And that's kind of a big thing with the Elder Scrolls Online. That's sort of what separates them from other comparable games, is this idea that whatever level you are, whatever your experience with the game, you can jump into any content at any point, and the entire thing will scale around you.
They were waiting for you to ask that question.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm ready for this preview.
Yeah,
they were like,
yeah.
Oh, yes, you are.
Yes. This is what makes us special. Yeah, very much so. But it's actually kind of cool because there have definitely been times where I've wanted to jump into something and it's like, man, this game's been going on for years. I don't know if I want to I just want to check out the new stuff or whatever. Or you just get stressed or anxious about it for whatever reason. So for this preview, I specifically started out with a level 1 character. Wow. I wanted to see what this would be, what this new content would be like for a level 1 character. And there's a brand new tutorial that they're doing that kind of just goes through the basics of the game. And it's cool. At the end of the tutorial, you're in this room with all of these portals, and they're like, where do you want to go? Here's all the content that we have.
Wow.
You want to go to Blackwood? There's a Blackwood portal over there. If you want to go, wherever. It's just a bunch of portals to Tamriel that'll take you to different content points throughout the world. But of course I chose Blackwood, and I made a female Breton necromancer. It starts out where you're pretty limited with what you could do in terms of abilities, but by the time I was done sort of with my preview, I spent about 14 hours in the game. I was level 19, I believe. I really loved how active the combat felt. So a big thing, in MMOs is a lot of times it's very tab targeted, waiting on cooldowns, that sort of thing. in Elder Scrolls Online, you're pretty much just limited by your resources, whether that's magicka or stamina. And so, like, as somebody who was trying to build a magicka-heavy necromancer, I made sure that magicka pool was as large as it could possibly be, and I was constantly spamming abilities. And something that separates the combat from a lot of other comparable games is you can interrupt enemies, you can stun them, you can dodge out of the way, and
Cool.
with the necromancer, you're summoning skeletons and things like that. You're using corpses, and if you use certain abilities with corpses, they'll have enhanced effects. And so, without getting too much in the weeds, I guess, it got to this point where I felt like I was, in a fight, I'd be circling around the arena, trying to pay attention to where my corpses were, trying to block enemy attacks as enemies were like launching things at me or jumping at me or rushing at me. And it just felt very active and fun in a way that I thought was really neat. And obviously, like, kind of evocative of like typical Elder Scrolls combat, but very much also its own thing.
Were you playing a third person or first person? Just curious.
So I played like 99% in third person. You can play in first person. That is an option. You just hit V on your keyboard if
Right.
you're playing on PC, and you can go in first person. But the speed at which your character moves is like too much for first person for me. Maybe there are people out there that really enjoy playing in first person, but third person definitely felt more natural with how quickly
and general
things move.
MMO situational awareness. You
Right.
tend to be especially if you're managing other people, corpses
Right.
in your party. But were you, as a level 1 person going into this new expansion content, was it like, okay, you need to be over in this specific area because you are low level, or it's just we're just going to kind of scale the whole thing to what you're doing?
Yeah, no. In my experience, it was all scaling. And so they did not sort of shepherd me in any one direction or the other. Like, I could get into the world and do whatever content I wanted, and it would scale around me completely. There was never a moment outside of this, like, 12-player trial that you're supposed to do with multiple people where I was like,
Sure.
I'm not ready for this. Like, that moment never came up. And so that was really neat, and I think that also helps it feel more like an Elder Scrolls game than your traditional MMO, where if you think about your traditional MMO, it's like, okay, this zone is levels, 1 through 5. This zone is levels 20 through 30, all that stuff. That doesn't exist here. So I could wander the world, and there's definitely, like, you explore this huge region, and you go off in a direction, and you might find a side quest to get roped into, and characters to meet, and all that sort of stuff. And so that is, of course, like, quintessential Elder Scrolls, and so that's definitely present here, which is really neat.
And always been tempting in terms of this game, like
Yeah.
I'll have friends on social media that will post, gains that they get on a specific character or stuff they're checking out with new content, and I'm like, you wouldn't have to talk me into it. I'd be totally willing, ready to go. 'Cause
Yeah.
those are fun worlds to explore, and worlds we're all familiar with, and so that's also been kind of like Lord of the Rings Online. This idea that like these places, if you've been
Yes.
following this franchise, and so these races, these governments, like all these conflicts, and so tempting.
Yeah, and speaking of, worlds that you're familiar with, Blackwood specifically is calling back to Oblivion. And so you're dealing with, Oblivion gates, you're dealing with sort of Daedric places, with kind of the like iconic, like black spiky structures and just all of that sort of stuff. And so if you're familiar with Oblivion, it will definitely feel familiar in that way.
Going back to Blackwood, the gates of Outland are opening. What year is it?
Right. Yeah. Definitely. And so that was cool to see, because I really loved Oblivion, like playing it in the early days of 360. It was an RPG that I just loved
This is
getting lost in.
my real introduction into. I mean, I like had checked out, Elder Scrolls 3, but Oblivion was really my big, where I got my feet wet in the world.
Yeah.
And really where I felt like I was traveling. Like I would get to like the top of a mountain, I'd be like, whoa, and I'd see like where I had come from. And really when I really put the open world RPG for me.
Yeah, that was Brandon. That's funny because that's almost the exact same experience for me, where I played Morrowind, but I felt like Oblivion was really my first kind of significant dive into Elder Scrolls. And yeah, it's really neat, and it is evocative of that, but it doesn't feel like pandering in a way. It's definitely its own thing, its own storyline, its own world, and it's cool because you kind of get this mix of sort of like imperial style cities that you're familiar with from Oblivion, but then like you kind of go to like the southeast and it mixes with sort of Argonian marshes, and they have a completely different style, than your typical sort of like imperial thing. And so seeing those kind of blend into each other is pretty neat. And I liked that quite a bit. But I think the big takeaway from this is, I was playing on like a press preview build of the game, right? So it's not live servers. It's not the entire population of Elder Scrolls Online. And so I didn't really get a sense of like what it's like for this as an MMO, right?
Sure.
There weren't like tons of people running around. It wasn't easy to group up with people. I like sadly went into the dungeon queue a couple times and like got nothing. And so I pretty much played this as a single player RPG, which is totally okay with me. I'm way into that. And it was an extremely satisfying experience, and I really didn't feel like I was missing out. And so I think that's something to say to people as well. If you like Elder Scrolls but you've never checked out ESO, you can treat this like a single player game. I think the quests are elaborate enough, and because everything scales to you, you're not really restricted in the way that you would be with other MMOs, for sure. But to kind of dig into the Blackwood stuff specifically and the things that I really liked, the main storyline, progressing through that was really interesting because it deals with sort of this area where these politicians are basically being killed, and you don't know who's doing it. You think it might be the Dark Brotherhood, and it's always fun getting the Dark Brotherhood involved with anything. And then, you get this conspiracy kind of has twists and turns along the way. And so it sort of feels like you're figuring out this murder mystery, which is really cool. And then how that is evolved to sort of like this cult and the Daedric prince that they worship, and all of that is really fun. And I want to go back into Blackwood to see where that story goes and how it progresses. And I think that's always a good thing in an MMO, and not something that you always are there for. The storytelling usually isn't that involved, but the voice acting is really great, and it's nice that when you talk to a character, it's not just like a static cutscene or think of WoW, right? And you have the quest thing pop up and you're just reading it. It's, you see the character, they're animating, they're emoting, you're picking dialogue options, and there's more sort of lore and background for whatever quest that you're doing that you can dig into sort of as you're going through these things. And so that's really neat as well. The other thing that I really liked is I really liked some of the side quests that I got involved in. In fact, I would say they were maybe even more enjoyable than the main quests. They were legitimately like funny and quirky and really well developed and lasted like just the right amount of time, like maybe 30 minutes or so. There was this one quest that involved this sort of noblewoman, Lady Laurent, and she has this manservant that she just like completely shit talks all the time, named Stibbins. And they go to this sort of Argonian structure, and they get cursed from an Argonian sorcerer. And Stibbins gets duplicated. He becomes cloned, and these clones like are sort of zombie-like, but they seemed obsessed with Lady Laurent. And you have to sort of figure out what's going on, how to stop the curse, how to get Stibbins back, and all this stuff. And it was just like genuinely funny and cute, and the voice acting was good. I don't know who voices Lady Laurent, but she did a really good job of being kind of stuck up and prissy but still likable. And it was really neat going in this dungeon because you would actually use the clones to solve puzzles. And so there would be these different plates that you'd have to activate, and you'd have to like lead the clones over to the plates. But the clones, they don't like water. So there would be areas where you'd have to go across the water and then use these plants that would shoot out like this tongue that would wrap up the clone and bring them over to your side, avoiding the water. And I loved that, you know, it was something outside of the combat, which is what you're doing most of the time, just to kind of make the dungeon stand out a little bit.
And the side quests, you were able to tell the difference between main quest stuff and side quest stuff just in the menus. They delineated that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, Brandon, because when I was looking at it, the quests were broken up by the area that you were in. So I had like, my Blackwood quests, but it wasn't like, this is the main quest. You can tell because when you click on the quest, it's like, this is what it's involving, right? And so
sure,
it's not that difficult, but it wasn't like broken up within that section of the quest list.
Because just jump me back into ESO if I'm going to do a region, you know, that I had not done before, maybe something that has been out for a while. It'd be tough for me to know, like, when am I done? If everything's scaling to me, when do I guess I just move on from the zone when I'm done with it, or, you know, looking for some climax in the story. And so it's neat that you were able to kind of tell, like, okay, this is kind of a fun side thing, and this is more geared towards the main campaign of the area.
Another side quest that I didn't go all the way through, but I thought the premise for it was interesting. There's this woman who wants to write like passionate romance novels, and so she's like, I have this lantern and it can speak to ghosts, and there's this ghost that went through this tragedy that'll be perfect, you know, material for my book. And I was like, that's really cool. That's something I would want to get involved in. But yeah, that's kind of the main story, the side quests. And I think the other major thing, something that they're really promoting with Blackwood specifically, is there are 2 companions that you can recruit in Blackwood. Bastion and Miri are their name. Bastion is this mage, and then Miri is this dark elf archer. And, you know, very classic Elder Scrolls thing, having a companion with you that follows you around and kind of chimes in. But I think what's really neat, and I went through both of them in their entirety, is both companions have entire quest lines.
Cool.
That you can get involved in. And what I thought was neat about both Bastion and Miri's quest line is they felt very, 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 very different. Where Bastion, due to kind of unfortunate circumstances, is sort of basically this servant for this family that kind of treats him like garbage, and he has to figure out what happened with his real family and why they put him in this situation. And so you kind of uncover his history. And this is more of like a multi-step thing where you're kind of travel all over Tamriel, finding bits of information here and there. And then Miri's story is a lot more like one big chunk and more immediate in terms of its danger, where she was traveling with some people, they got kidnapped, they're going to be sacrificed in this awful way, and so you have to go and help her save them. And then once you finish their quest lines, right, you don't even have to finish them. Once you kind of do the introductory part of at least Bastion's quest, you can unlock them, and then they'll follow you around. And kind of the idea that they said behind the companions is they want it so they can assist people in doing sort of like group-based content. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing a 4-player dungeon, with companions, you don't necessarily need to have 4 people. You could have 2 people and 2 companions, which I thought was really neat and might be easier to kind of like get your friends involved. Unfortunately, I didn't get to like test that out with group content, but I really enjoyed how well developed these characters were. I definitely liked Miri way, way, way more than Bastion. Bastion is very much like I am a good guy and I want to do the right thing. And he's very like,
Snooze.
he's just very traditionally heroic and stuff. And if that's your thing, you'll probably love him. But Miri is a lot more like, she's also a good person, but she's a bit rougher around the edges, has a bit more attitude to her. And so I found her way more entertaining. It's like, yeah, I'm definitely rolling with Miri, but it's cool because you have quite a bit of control over what your companions do. And so you can, like any of the classes in Elder Scrolls Online, they can play sort of any role. That's kind of a big thing about ESO. Is like,
neat. Even though they're like an archer and a mage specifically?
Yeah, so that's the thing, Brandon, is like I picked a necromancer, right? And you would traditionally think like, oh, okay, that's DPS. I can actually build my necromancer as a tank or healing if I want to. And you can do that with anything, any of the 6 classes in Elder Scrolls Online. And so that also kind of carries through to the companions. And they have, their own hotbar for skills and everything. And depending on the order that you put them in, that's the order that they'll go through those abilities in battle, which is pretty neat. And then
Very
they have
cool.
they have their own unique equipment as well that you can give them, which is cool. The thing that I am most confused on, and I tried to play around with it a little bit, but it's still vague, and maybe it'll be more solidified at launch, is you have this rapport system with them where you will do certain things and they'll like that, and you can build up your relationship, and there are rewards for doing that. The only instance where that kind of played out is it actually worked out really well from an RP perspective. I was trying to help Bastion rescue somebody that was very important to him. And we were going through this cave or dungeon or something. And I was like, ooh, there's a locked chest. Let me lockpick it. And he didn't like that.
Yeah.
And it, like from the quest perspective, it
Sorry,
made
buddy.
sense because it's like, hey, I want to get going. I want to like save this person. I don't know if it was tied specifically to the quest or if he just doesn't like lockpicking in general. I'm not sure. But beyond that, they weren't super receptive to what I did or did not do. And I'm curious because like you look at the companion menu and it's not really clear what is going to trigger good rapport or bad rapport. And so I think that could be made a little bit more concrete. But
Yeah, that seems kind of more of a Dragon Age thing than a
Sure.
Elder Scrolls thing. That's interesting.
yeah, like a BioWare-esque.
But I really like that they are set characters. When you had mentioned companions, that's not what I had thought. I thought that there would just be a system for you to maybe build them or pick between a couple of stock characters and then give them a class, and then they're off and running. But that's awesome that they got a backstory and a general attitude, and I bet the community will be clamoring for more of these.
Yeah. After doing their quests, I just kind of wanted more, and I don't know if there is more to explore with each of them in Blackwood. Again, I'm not really clear on that, but I also wonder if, in future DLCs and future chapters, if they'll have additional stories that you can play through as well. I don't know. There's something about companion quests that I think are always quite fun. But
Agreed.
it was also cool in combat because, like I was saying with the Necromancer, I had to manage my spells and try to like line up corpses in a certain way so I could get the full effect of them. And it was nice having somebody else in combat that could kind of distract the enemy while I set things up and blasted with spells from range.
A lot of times that's all you need. It's just that one time that the enemy like, oh, turns the other way. You're like, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
just let off me just for a second.
and yeah, more than anything, that was what was useful from them, is them just kind of holding aggro. But as a newbie to Elder Scrolls Online, two things that I didn't really like, I guess maybe 3 things, is because everything scales around you, nothing was ever really that hard.
Okay.
It wasn't brain dead simple either. Like I felt like enemies had enough health that, I did kind of want to pay attention to how I was building my character and how I was using abilities to combat. But it was never like, oh God, like this guy or this boss or this mob. That never happened. It was pretty smooth sailing for the most part, which is normal, I think, as you're leveling in MMOs. So I'm curious, like, how difficult the group content is, how difficult in-game stuff is, that sort of thing, which I didn't really get to test out, so maybe I don't really have a great idea of how that plays out. The other thing that I thought was kind of weird is when you're talking to people, like specifically for requests, you can dig into other dialogue options to get a little bit more information, but because I was really enjoying getting invested in the lore, and so I was going through all that stuff, I felt like as I was going through that stuff, they were just kind of repeating information that they had already told me.
Sure.
And so it felt a little artificial in that way, where it didn't really feel like a conversation. It just sort of felt like an info dump where they were sort of being repetitive in how they relayed information. And I was like, this could maybe be resolved if you just let players like review what had already been said in the conversation, so you didn't have to repeat things. Or it just seemed like there was a more elegant way of handling that problem. The other thing that I didn't love, and I do think it can be a problem in MMOs sometimes, is for some of the quests, the steps felt a little underwhelming, where it's like you go and you talk to somebody and then they send you to somebody on the other side of the world, it felt like, and then you just go there to talk to somebody else. And so the steps can like be pretty mundane, and I think as somebody who didn't have like all the fast travel points unlocked, could get a little tedious in that sense, but probably less of a problem for people that have a lot of time invested.
I remember that was like the big Greedfall thing was just go back to that person, and I'm like, I just was okay.
Yeah.
It's like the fast travel point down the street, round the corner, through the door, up the staircase, into the bedroom. There, okay. I'm glad we talked. It's like there's got to be a way, to streamline that stuff. But it's good to know what you're getting into, and potentially there's a lot of stories, a lot of people to talk to if you're just now just jumping in, to ESO. But it's really interesting to get that perspective. When you messaged me to chat about this, I was like, ESO? Elder Scrolls Online? It hasn't been talked about that much, but I'm very much enjoying your perspective on this. It's going to be interesting to see with that task of developers that have managed a world this big, constantly having to think of new people coming in. It's like, how do we entice them with the stuff that we're doing? How do we educate them on how to play the game? How do we make stuff available to them? How do we guide them in the right direction? So it's good to know they're doing it.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that the position that it put me in, right? So I'm coming at this completely fresh. I really like Elder Scrolls. This game has been around for 6 years, I think. Wow. 6-7 years, something like that. And I'm invested in the story, despite not really being involved all this time. I'm invested in the story. I want to see more of it. And honestly, like, by no means is it the best looking game or anything like that. It's not going to like blow you away, but I actually ended up taking a couple of screenshots on my PC, just of areas where I was like, wow, this is really cool. I love the way that this looks. And I always love that about MMOs is just being kind of enamored with the area that you're exploring. I think is always really neat.
Taking a knee.
Yeah. I just thought of this. I should have mentioned it earlier, but a couple of other things to bring up that I really like is as you level up, expectedly you get things like put points into your skills, put points into your attributes. That's not really that crazy. But the small thing that I like that ESO does is when you reach certain like milestones in leveling, they'll give you like an extra thing. They'll be like, choose this reward, or here's a cooking recipe, or just something that I think makes leveling up exciting beyond what you normally get. And like the cooking recipe thing was like a nice nudge in like, hey, maybe check out cooking, check out crafting a little bit. A way to kind of naturally push you into other elements of the game, and I thought that was really well handled. The other thing that is really cool is, Brandon, if you pick an archer, which I know you love doing, in classic Elder Scrolls fashion, you are not, restricted to light armor or a bow. Like, you can wear whatever you want. You can wear heavy armor. You can use a greatsword. And then as you use these things and as you level up these things, as you use them, again, classic Elder Scrolls style, you will get skills for those things. And so it's not just your class skills. It's not just your racial abilities. It's like if you are rocking a lot of light armor pieces, you will open up a light armor skill tree that you can invest in. And so I think that flexibility is also very cool and a good way to kind of honor the source material as well.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that about Elder Scrolls. Just get out there and do it.
Just get out there and do it. Yeah.
Just run and jump and shoot.
Yes. But I had a great time. I know that was a lot of me explaining things. I think it's always hard with an MMO because you feel like there's so much to talk about.
Well, you excited to explain it says a lot as
yes.
well. You being
Yeah.
like, okay, I have gather round. I have news.
Right.
I've just returned from Tamriel.
Right.
There's
I've
much
just
to report,
returned
sire.
Yeah. But it was really fun, and I think they're doing a good job there. And I'm curious to see how people respond to Blackwood that like are super invested. Who knows?
too.
But yeah, it's been fun. Thank you so much, Brandon, and thank
you, Ben.
you, audience, for listening.